In the beginning, there was nothing. As it so happens, there was also something. A trio of golden goddesses, well known from prior stories, flaming beacons of wisdom, courage, and power. But there was also something that the stories left out. Something lurking in the void, whose existence recontextualizes the very history of Hyrule. That something is Null, God of Nothing. If you'd prefer not to stare endlessly into the void, click that subscribe button, join the Discord, or consider becoming a channel member. Links in the description. Hyrule and Echoes of Wisdom has for some time been combating a plague of purple rifts, gateways through which reality is sucked into the still world, a void space of suspended animation, where reality slowly dissolves into nothing. Link is a past victim of said rifts, though it's unclear how common of an occurrence this is, and one of few to ever return. But by game's beginning, the impact of these rifts has expanded, engulfing large swaths of every region of Hyrule, and with it, its inhabitants. Zelda, assisted by the fairy Tri, rematerializes Hyrule's lost chunks, and by gaining the sanctions of the goddesses, learns of the rift's origins, which goes a little something like this. In the beginning, there was nothing. As it so happens, there was also something. Worlds would begin to form, only to be devoured by the one who dwelt in the void, Null. The three golden goddesses, finding this behavior unacceptable, created the sky and land as a prison to curb Null's insatiable appetite. As is their wont, Null would create the rifts in an attempt to consume their prison and transform all that which exists back into the void. To combat this, the Tris, fairies of the goddesses, were sent to repair these fissures in reality. From this origin story, we learn a lot about Null. Null is a primordial entity who existed before the creation of the world, an amorphous ball of darkness. We see such a creature for the first time after thwarting Ganon in the stilled Hyrule Castle, which desired the world in its entirety and consumed all life indiscriminately. The physical stability of Hyrule is challenged by Null's growing power, resulting from the Tris having become sealed within this cosmic being. We come to find that Null has actually been absorbing the Tris, and this is assumedly from where the power to create echoes originates. Once we get inside Null's body, a giant warty ball of primordial goo, we can see Tris, thousands of them, trapped in Null's tissue, as well as double helixes throughout their insides that not only give this body a more organic look, but also echoes the shape of the Tri-Rod itself, and the Tris spiraling upward while mending rifts, lending more credence to the idea that Null's very form is influenced by what's absorbed, hence the corrupted Tri-like shell and masks from the final boss fight, more evidence for which is also found in the regrowing of limbs after absorbing more Tris, as well as the yellow light and little Triforce pieces that follow Cosmic Gas Null's copying of Zelda. According to the game files, this echo is called Tikam, a name that never appears in-game, but we'll talk more about that shortly. This cosmic vortex form, with no real shape or form other than the shell it creates around itself, is also revealed in later phases of the final boss fight. The origin of some of Null's other physical characteristics are less clear. The sinewy arms could be facsimiles of any muscle tissue, while the three-fingered claws are found on no other creatures, at least as far as I could tell. The closest culprits are any of the Lizalfos or Volvagia. But these lizard-like creatures clearly have two forefingers and one back finger, as opposed to the evenly spaced fingers of Null. This all points to the fact that Null doesn't have any creative power, just the ability to use the powers of that which have been absorbed to alter their appearance from the typical nebulous form. Besides the obvious cheesy pun of Null existing in the void as a play on the phrase null and void, Null's name has many other connotations. Null, of course, is associated with the number 0 in English, and the name is often translated in other languages as nihil, which in Latin means nothing and is the root word for nihilism, the belief that life is meaningless. Related to this, I think Null's name is less a descriptor of what Null is, but instead a descriptor of what Null does. Null, after all, is a force of nature personified, an extinguisher, a nullifier, one who cancels out or invalidates life, who seeks the power of the Triforce to break their rusty cage and engulf all existence. Thinking about Null in this way, as a primordial force instead of, say, an evil will like Ganondorf, makes them difficult to condemn. It would be like condemning the tide for smashing against the rocky shore, or a solar flare for vaporizing the power grid. But as a personification of destruction, of the unrelenting power of death, I understand how characters unwilling to die would take a stand against such a force. It was clever to make Null a force that opposed the Golden Goddesses, instead of existing in the void with them, to make this opposition more believable. Also interestingly named are these little goo creatures called tecumes, which germinate from the rifts and from which dark echoes are made. This name sounds a lot like vacuum, which is a synonym for emptiness or void, and they share a material similarity to the inside of Null, which leaks black goo, and certainly makes it seem like those creatures aren't actually created, but rather extensions of Null that can be sloughed off and sent loose. Even Null in the origin story is depicted as having these shedded, disconnected parts. The same type of creature is what creates Takam, the Zelda Echo, who very much contains the personality exhibited by Null. One of the Zelda wikis compares this nomenclature to the Hebrew word Tathom, which means void, or Teom, the biblical deep or abyss that existed before God created the world. Although these appeals to the Hebrew feel more like finding a pattern where one doesn't exist than intentional naming by the developers. However, this does lead us nicely into how Null's origin story recontextualizes Hyrule's creation myth within the Zelda universe and also connects it to other myths here in our primary world. Hyrule's creation myth was first depicted in the manual for A Link to the Past, where it states that the goddesses descended from a distant nebula, and was later expounded upon in Ocarina of Time, where the goddesses descended upon the chaos that was Hyrule. Both of these stories detail that Hyrule was created, not why Hyrule was created. In the updated myth, the time before Hyrule contains both the Golden Goddesses and this manifestation of chaos and disorder. This puts it in the same space as other myths that personify this primordial nothingness. The Greek Chaos, Norse Gunungagap, Egyptian Nun, the Babylonian Tiamat, the aforementioned Hebrew Tehom, the Chinese Wuji, as well as destroyer gods like Shiva, Owuo, Perses, Kupactli, an Aztec god who, like Null, is insatiable, and of course, Beerus. Fundamentally, a good creation story not only tells us an entertaining, symbolic account of a culture's beginnings, it also tells us something about that culture. Take the Norse creation myth, which probably has one of the hardest opening lines in all of written history. Burning ice, biting flame. That is how life began. For a hardened people who lived in the bleak cold, those opening lines perfectly encapsulate the Norse's warrior culture. Likewise, Hyrule's origin myth tells us that chaos and destruction can be kept in check by the proper balance of wisdom, courage, and power. Hey, thanks for watching. If you're interested in more Zelda character analyses, check out one of these videos.